Fáilte Arash to the Crazy House Prices podcast with me, Ciarán Mulqueen. This is episode 6, and today I am chatting to Darragh O'Brien, the Minister for Housing, about how he feels personally about how things are going with his schemes, his thoughts on the homeless figures, build to rent, investment funds, and all of the rest. And I think, well, at least I hope, you know, if you're listening to this or if you're following my page or you follow my Twitter or my Instagram or whatever, you'll understand that I have no allegiances to any political parties. If there was an election tomorrow, I have no idea who I would vote for. But like most people, I just want housing to get a little bit better and a bit more affordable for people. So without any further delay, here is Darragh O'Brien. Now, I have with me on the podcast today, Minister for Housing, Darragh O'Brien. Thank you so much, Darragh, for joining me and agreeing to be grilled by me on this podcast. I'm only joking.
My pleasure, Ciarán. No bother.
You're very good. And I do always say, you know, you're always very good with your time and very generous with your time for me. So I do really appreciate it. And I know time is tight. So I just want to run through a few things that I am kind of seeing on the page and a few questions that my patrons have sent in. But just, I suppose the main kind of gist of it is we've a good few government schemes now, so I want to give you a chance to maybe give us an update on those. Maybe if you could give us some figures as well as to if people have gone for them. I'm always banging on about the schemes, and they do a lot of them tend to be more demand side, but I think with the likes of the vacant home levy or the vacant home tax that's coming in, that's a little bit more supply side now. I will have a chat about that later on, but maybe if you could give us a quick update on what's available.
Look, we've a few schemes out there. Look, fundamentally, why are the schemes there? Because I want to help people who want to buy their own home, own their own home. And I push very hard for the first home scheme, which people might know as the equity scheme, okay? Shared equity. And what that is basically helping people bridge the gap between the finance they have, so their mortgage and savings of 250,000, they're buying a house of 320,000. A lot of these people are renters and they can't bridge that gap. So I opened the first home scheme in July. I'd actually argue it is a supply side measure. It's supply to meet the demand, because we're actually seeing already a movement in that space of more development going towards first time buyers and new builds. So we've had a real good start to this. We've had actually over 500 approvals already on individual houses for home buyers through the scheme. The average equity stake is about 78,000, and we've had about 1,500 registrations to the scheme. And what this really means is, like, you have lots of people who are on your page, lots of people that I meet who are paying $2,000 a month in rent. If they could get the mortgage they needed, they'd be paying a mortgage of 1,000, and they're actually now able to buy those homes. And this applies also to the first start principle. That's for people who may have been divorced, don't own a home, or gone through personal insolvency, don't own a home. So there's been a really good start to that, and that's going to ramp up, and I'm actually seeing the interest in it. So firsthomeskeme.ie, it's a good page, you can apply through it, and it's a practical measure, and that's a partnership between ourselves and the Main Street banks, with €400 million in equity initially, and about 40 million of that already has actually been approved under the 500 approvals. And there's no interest on that. Like, this is not a second mortgage, it's an equity stake. If you want to buy it out, you can buy it out. If you don't, you wait till you sell, or it passes on. And when it's bought out, it goes back into the Affordable Housing Fund. So that's the first one that's really out there, and there's a lot of talk around it. Obviously, the budget's just over, and you know, the Department of Finance, ourselves and government agreed to extend the Help to Buy grant. That's the 30,000 in tax back that people get on earnings. And I know, look, there's been talk around it as to you know, is it appropriate? And that, what I see, to be honest with you, why I push for it to be kept and it's retained for the next 2 years, is it's helped nearly 35,000 homeowners get their deposit together. Mazars did a report on it. Your guys on your page may have seen that as well. And whilst there are things within it that they want reviewed, and the Department of Finance is going to, their recommendation was that the scheme be retained for the next 2 years to provide certainty. So that's in place. Then we have basically two others very quickly. Cost rental, which didn't exist 12 months ago. And what cost rental is state-backed affordable rents with long-term secure tenures of minimum of 40 years. And basically they're supported by us, is that we provide an equity loan to that and low-cost finance. So the rent's only based on the cost of developing and managing the apartments or the homes. And actually, we've approved 900 tenancies there. Met lots of new tenants who've gone in there for people above the social housing limits. And that's taken off. And we've made some changes to get more schemes in. And that's actually working now. Now, I want to scale up. And I'll talk to you about that maybe during the course of this, about how we're going to do that. So we'll have hundreds more next year and by the end of this year. And the final piece, I might deal with Creek Home, the vacancy piece as well. But the final piece is the affordable purchase through the local authorities. So this is what used to be done years ago. And this is another strand. And we do that through the Affordable Housing Fund and Housing for All. And I've approved actually 29 schemes across the country. The first one's being sold actually this month, starting at around €160,000. And there's about 1,900 homes approved under that. So all of these things are moving. It takes time for people to feel that. And that's obviously, I can see the momentum building, but we need to make sure that people are seeing that. So the more people who are getting their homes through these measures, the better, because they're real tangible supports in my view. I can deal with the vacancy grant now if you'd like, because that's something we've discussed before. And I suppose, look, I launched that in July. And that's for vacant homes, a grant of 30,000, for derelict homes, a grant of 50,000, to help to defray the cost of doing that home up. And that's for homeowners, not just first-time buyers. So it's for someone who might be right-sizing, moving back into the village. That applies to cities as well now. From November, it'll be for above shop or homes within our cities, villages, towns, and rural one-off houses. And we've had a serious interest in that. In the month of August, without even really pushing it, we just short of 200 applications across the country. And coupled with that, I suppose, one thing I've discussed with you before as well is, like, there are a lot of the carrot piece, but then the vacant property tax is coming in as well. I think that's a really important measure, one that's been talked about for a long time. It'll be 3 times the LPT on a property, and that comes in the finance bill next month. So that's just a quick run through of some of the schemes that are actually out there at the moment.
Now, I suppose people listening to this, if they're following me, they know I'm not a big fan of the Help to Buy scheme. I think we like I have dozens of examples of, you know, as soon as it's announced, it goes up, the prices go up. But anyway, we could probably do a podcast on each one of those. I think people will. I think the cost rental thing is largely being very positive. I think the only complaints people have about that is they'd love more of it, which is a good complaint. The Help to Buy, the shared equity, and all that. I've spoken to you about this before, and it's something I do talk about. Like, these are, nothing is going to be a perfect solution, but these are like parts of an overall solution. And obviously we'd like to see more of it. We'd like to see prices come down, and people will say with the shared equity or with the Help to Buy, the thresholds are too low. You can't find a house for under whatever it is, a new build. But that's, I mean, they should be under that. Do you know what I mean? If we raise it up higher, it just gives them a target to put the prices up even more.
I agree. Just on that point, if we could say, actually, what we found already, because they're regional price caps, I've even seen a couple of schemes where the prices have come down to meet to meet actually the ceilings. Okay, and we are getting people, even in my own area, Fingal. There's a good spread. I can see which counties they're coming in from. And actually, in comparable schemes, our scheme is better, actually, I might add. There's the Homes England scheme that was there. That actually led to an increase in supply in first-time buyer homes. And we're starting to see that. Like, in the last 12 months, about 16,000 first-time buyers bought their homes. That's a good number of people. And that's the highest amount since 2008. But I agree with your point, though. Like, you'd love a situation whereby, you know, there was affordability permeated the market, and there wasn't a need for a lot of the schemes. But I believe in trying to help people. And like, we're seeing home ownership rates over the last 10, 15 years drop substantially.
Yeah.
I think these measures, particularly around the first home scheme, because we haven't set arbitrary salary thresholds, it's basically you proving that there's a gap between what you have and what you need, and it's still affordable, and it's fully financially underwritten. And that's actually taken off really well. I'm actually very, very excited about that one, and I'm very positive about it. I think this could be, we've the scope to expand it in the sense of putting in more money. And it is an investment by the state, because it is an equity, you know. And whilst we're doing all this, because the other piece that's really important, and this, I know a lot of people on your page want to be buying their own homes, but it's about the overall supply. And we need more social homes. So this year we'll build more new social homes than ever before. That helps the private rental market. It helps the purchase market. And we got to get, I think this year we're talking about 25,000 homes, and we'll exceed that, which is good in a tough year. And we need to build on that and exceed it further next year too.
And I just think on the vacant property thing, like I know this, like we, as you said, we've spoken about this before, and 3 times the local property tax is still a very low percentage. But the way I'm looking at it, and I said this the other day on my page, is Pascal Donoghue has been so against having a vacant home tax for so long that at least he has turned a little bit, and hopefully it builds on from there. But I think you'd probably agree it's too low at 3 times the local property tax. It's to encourage them to put that house for sale, because it might cost them a few £100 a year.
Well, I think it costs a few hundred more. Okay, like
Yeah.
if you look at the average property tax, let's say in our urban areas in particular, it can be substantial enough, 3 times that. One of the big reasons we were looking at that, and this is something we discussed before, is let's say some of the bigger developments that maybe apartments that are developed, and we had lots of reports of many of those apartments being empty because a fund owned them and they wanted to keep the unit price up, they want to keep the rent up. Now, actually, from work that we've done, that is a much smaller issue now. That's actually seen occupancy rates go way up. But I think, look, getting the fundamental principle enshrined that there is a vacant property tax. There'll be fair exemptions if someone's like long-term ill,
Yeah.
and obviously a home going through probate, which can take, that's another issue we could do a podcast about too, like how long that process takes. It's actually the principle of it. And the good thing that it's in is that it can be varied, and it can be varied upwards.
10%. Get it up past inflation.
Yeah, 10% is the figure that's in a lot of people's heads at the moment for another reason too. But look, it's a good principle. It needs to be there, and it sets down a marker that, look, it's not okay to leave properties empty. And as I said, that can be varied upwards. I've fought for that for some time, for that to come in. It actually is an objective in housing for all too. But the vacant grants, by the way, and we debated these in the Dáil this week. I actually think I've kept them. I haven't linked them to the value of the property. So if someone buys a house in Longford, in the main street in Longford town, and it's €120,000, they get 30 grand if it's vacant. They get 50 if it's derelict, and they use that money to bring the home back into use. I think that's a really good use of Exchequer Fund, a good help using existing stock. And we're doing that whilst we're continuing to use other schemes to get those other vacant properties into use for our local authorities too.
Yeah.
And we'll monitor them. Like, the schemes are just launched, and we'll tweak them as we go along if we need to,
Okay, and just to take the minister hat off for a second and put the Darragh as a father, Darragh as a citizen, the homeless figures are frightening. As a teacher, I seeing 3,220 children as homeless is devastating. I've been an infant teacher half of my career. My empathy levels are through the roof, and so I get stories in like this all the time. And like, how does it make you feel when you hear those numbers?
Yeah, well, look, it's the single big, and this is speaking as myself, as a citizen, as a dad. I have a 14-year-old. She's upstairs doing her homework at the moment, and like, it's not at all where I want us to be. It is. I am confident, though, we can get a handle on it, and the only way we're going to do that is by increasing supply and providing the support for families that we need. But it's the first thing I think about every morning when I wake up, and it's about how we can continue. And it's a moving target. And I've met loads of people. I've been out and about around the cities as well. I meet our homeless services report directly to me, and I chair that group to see what can be done and what they need for us to be done. So we've talked about, the social housing piece that's really important, getting our local authorities to use their existing stock better and turn them around quicker. But then there's the pieces around, like, what supports we provide. So, something that came up earlier on in the year, which I've done now, which is actually starting to work really well, is where a landlord is quitting and a tenant who's a HAP tenant or a RAS tenant gets a notice to quit. I've told our local authorities, you're to buy that home. You bring it into public housing stock. There was concerns in the past about a moral hazard, people would be jumping up the list, but like, we're in emergency times here.
Yeah.
Like, fundamentally as well, Like I feel this very much. I do myself personally, right? But we've had 12 years of very serious undersupply. Like this has been something that's been building. Even before I took over, the figures were over 10,000. We had COVID. We were able to bring in emergency protections. We're looking at further protections that we could potentially bring in there. But even with eviction bans and that can have a knock-on effect then by driving more private properties out of the market and making the situation worse. But I think where it's targeted, it can work. And, you know, but you can't keep them going forever either, because so what you've got to try to do is exit people from homelessness into housing. And whilst the figures, Kieran, are like, they're shocking, right? And they are. Don't shock me, because like I've expected to see some of this increase, is that we're moving people out all the time too. And that's the piece of work we need to do. So it's no consolation to anyone. It's not the same 10,500, 10,800 people within that system. And people are moving out, and we're actually being able to, like, I brought back about 6,500 vacant council homes in the last 2 years. We have another 2,500 this year, and there's very little left on the vacant side in social housing stock. But fundamentally, like, if I build between 8,000 and 9,000 new build social homes this year and build on that again next year, and that doesn't include what we're acquiring, and bringing homes in through other modes as well, that will help. And it's starting, like, I'm meeting people around the country who are getting their keys for their home for life all across the Republic. But it's the single biggest issue for me, to be very frank.
Yeah.
All of the other things we got to help. There's lots of issues within my department. There's lots of challenges. The homeless piece, I've met kids in homeless hubs with their folks. You know, I've visited emergency accommodation, and I chair the task force myself. As look, your people who are on and say, well, of course you should. Of course I should, absolutely. But I'm very close to it. Right? It's the one thing that I really want to see us turn the corner on. And I'm confident we can, actually. It looks bleak at the moment, but I'm confident that we can.
And like, I guess I get so many stories sent in. Some are, you know, more frustration, some are anger, some are absolutely devastating. Like, I don't even want to read out an email that I got in, because I'd need to put a disclaimer on the podcast. It was that dark, and it's just, when, like, I'm getting them all day, I imagine you're getting them all day as well. And it's reading them is really tough. And I guess, I know when people see, like, your politician, they often do forget your father as well. So I guess maybe just trying to get into that, like, the personal side of it, and how it impacts you and your day to day and in work. And as you said, it's the first thing you think about. But as you said, you're moving people out of homelessness, but there's more going into it then. You know, the figures are going up.
Yeah, there is. And there's a combination of a couple of things. Like, we've seen a lot of people out of the private rental market notices to quit, and I am addressing that as best we can. But we got to get supply up, and we have had a big discussion about rental, and, you know, rental properties. We need properties in all tenures to be able to provide safe and secure homes. The cost rental, just a pretty cat, get down.
I had to lock mine out.
He's just let him in. Go away. He's not even bed. It's 5 o'clock. Sorry.
No, you're grand.
Look, this is a really serious one. Is that we will get a handle on it, and we've a handle on it in the sense that, you know, I know what the pipeline is in relation to new housing delivery. We've got to look at the emergency measures that we can take and make sure the supports are there for people. We have seen in very bleak figures, thankfully, one figure that continues to decline is the rough sleepers. And we made a real, you know, for the people at the really sharpest edge, a lot of people who've been long-term rough sleeping, may out of addiction, mental health issues, and that. We have the scheme, the Housing First scheme, which gives not just the keys to an apartment, but the wraparound health supports. And we've actually provided about 90% retention rate in tenancies there. That well, and we've expanded that nationwide. So, you know, this isn't an excuse by any shape or form, but you don't turn around 10 years of undersupply in 2 years. And that's starting to take hold now, because I can see more options there for people. The other thing that we've got to look after everyone who comes in and seeks assistance in emergency accommodation. One thing that's difficult to quantify as well is new arrivals too. And people do come in, and that's it's our job to look after them too, but that's difficult to predict. But as we get the stock up, which is happening this year, and lots of people are tune into your podcast, a lot of people won't be feeling that yet, but I'm seeing it on the ground, and it's my single focus. Because look, I've a family, as you said. I've I've 4 sisters. I have a brother. They've all kids. My folks, thanks be to God, are still alive. They grew up in, and my dad was at Ivy Gardens in Crumlin, and my mom's from Drimna. And like, I believe in public housing and social housing, always have. And I'm glad to be in a position to do it and to actually change the dial on housing, because it's something I've always believed in, that the state should be the main player in it, to provide that safe and secure home. So that is happening. But look, trust me on this. It is genuine. It's the first thing that I think about every morning when we're up. I'm dealing with issues every single day of the week, and we will make progress on it, and we will get to grips with it. It looks bleak right now, and it is. I'm not disputing that for 1 minute, but I have a responsibility as minister to tackle this and to provide the longer term solutions that are there, and that's what we're about through Housing for All, and it is starting to take hold.
And on the supply side, then, like, it is something I've always wondered, is like you spoke there about your dad was in Ivy in Crumlin, which was fantastic. Like, I mean, those houses are some of the best built, and the house I'm in as well now that we bought was
congrats on your new house. I saw that. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, one of the first. It wasn't social housing. It was, I think it was tenant purchase or whatever. But just on that, like, why can't we go back to that? I know we need instant supply, which is buying from the private market. I understand that. But why can't we, let's say interest rates have been at 0% for so long. Now they're gone up. We've kind of missed the boat on that. But why couldn't we have borrowed without those 0%, say 100-year bonds, whatever, and use that state land, and the state become the developer? I'm not saying you go out and get a shovel, but like, the developer doesn't put a shovel in the ground anyway. They hire the builders.
Well, no, like, look, fair point. Okay, maybe to answer it, because there's a couple of answers of parts within this answer. Firstly, is Housing for All. It's the first housing plan that's fully funded. So I have the capital every year, and that's actually state investment. So for this year, just over 4 billion. For 2023, 4.5 billion, and that is actually to build houses.
Yeah, okay, but a lot of the arguments people will have, though, is a good chunk of that 4 billion is going to the private market, or buying off the private market. So like you said.
No. Sorry, just to correct that, and that has been the case with long-term leasing, which I've phased out and we're stopping. Okay, and I've been very clear on that. People look at local authorities are building. Our approved housing bodies are really important. So our TUA, our CLUIDs, our response, right? They're actually building, because we're giving them the finance, and they're council homes, right? Public housing on private land. Like, just 2 minutes down the road from me, there's a brilliant development that won an award in Balgriffin, Cars Lane. That was an old office block. The council were able to source the land. The housing agency, through myself and ourselves with grants, were able to provide the finance to respond. And we've 72 brilliant apartments there. They've actually responded, as an example, they've 1,400 homes under construction at the moment. So we need that. We need our council building stuff. And then to talk about the state developing, because you're right. And that's why I took a grip of the Land Development Agency. And the Land Development Agency has capitalised itself to the tune of about 3.5 billion. And actually, on Monday next, we're turning the sod on Shangana Castle, which has been out there for years. That's actually going to be the largest social and affordable housing development in the state ever. 593 homes. I was down in St. Kevin's in Cork. You guys who were down in Cork will know St. Kevin's very well, overlooking the River Lee. Fine big old red brick building that's been derelict forever. We've started work, and we're going to be providing social, cost rental, and affordable there. And actually, thankfully, this year, because what I've been really anxious to do is get the LDA to get them homes. And in Mallow, a couple of weeks ago, I was there, and the first homes provided by the LDA under affordable purchase are there. So the LDA is about developing idle state land for the common good. And it's actually starting to happen now. And I agree with you. And like, they are 3.5 billion they have in their war chest right now. And they're going to be very well placed to deliver hundreds and thousands of homes. But I had to get the legislation in, because they were there forever and they've been planned, and they've done good master planning and stuff. But we need to get the shovels into the ground, and that's thankfully is happening now. And they were constrained, as were the council, somewhat the last 2 years. It's not an excuse, it's just a reality because of COVID. Like 2 significant construction shutdowns. that did affect it, but we're catching up on it. So the state is the biggest player in the housing market, and what we're not doing anymore, and what I've insisted on, is about getting extra stock. So I'm not going into a housing development down the road in Swords or in Ballincollig and saying I'm taking all of those that would have gone out onto the market. That doesn't happen with the AHBs. They're basically ground up turnkeys that have been planned for social and for cost rental and for affordable. So, I get that, where the criticisms were there in the past, but that's changed. That's changed now.
Okay, and then speaking of those estates, let's say, that are being built, and I can say this, you can't say it because you're a politician, but I could say, like, you're taking over from Owen Murphy, the previous Minister for Housing, who I would argue, I think you've spent the first 2 years of your trying to kind of undo some of the policies he's put in place, and build to rent being one of those, and the lower standards. And I think the figures are, there's over 40,000 built to rent units that are, I hate that word as well, units, like they're homes, but they're sitting with planning but aren't being built due to, like, labor shortages or whatever, or increase in costs. And I was chatting to an architect the other day who has his company that he works in have, I think, about 6,000 units that are sitting there between 3 different developers. One is not building because he feels there's a crash coming, and the other two, just it's proven not to be profitable enough for them. So, like, what can we do there, or what's your plan there?
Well, firstly, the build to rent, I never liked it. I don't like the word unit either. You're right, and I've actually got rid of the separate standards. I announced that just last week.
Yeah, which is great, I think.
My party's Darragh, and it levels the playing fields. And we do need rental properties. So I've always said that too. We do. Like, people, different times of their lives, want to be renting, want to be moving around. They might not want it, but problem is now people are renting for longer than they want in many instances.
And it's at the highest rents ever.
It's incredibly expensive. Now, put rent in at 2%. We put the rent tax credit back in, which will help, €1,000 per renter next year, and that is happening, and that will be in the finance bill in the next couple of weeks, but we'll start from early next year. But anyway, get back to your question: how do we activate those dormant permissions? We're actually doing that at the moment. I mentioned the Land Development Agency. I see real opportunities in what were these build to rent permissions to go to build to cost rental and build to affordable. Okay, and we're actively pursuing a number of them. The advantage with these ones, Kieran, are a lot of these actually have the planning permissions. The land are there, the design is there. So there are financing issues with some of them because interest rates have gone up and have made a number of them maybe not viable. But I think there's an opportunity for the state to step in.
Yeah.
And I've charged the LDA with the urban local authorities to go after them basically and see, can we develop them? And I think we can. And we would develop them for cost rental and for affordable and for social.
And how does that work? Let's say, like, so if the state are going in to buy them, that, so let's say the developer who had it and got the planning, like, how does it work? And like, do you CPO them, or do they have to agree to sell? And if they are selling, is it not a case that we gave a lot of this land to them via NAMA at a budget, or at a discount, and now are we going to be buying it back off them at crate? Are they going to make a fortune out of us?
I don't see that actually. Some of the sites that I've looked at, because there are initial sort of 5 that we're looking at, because we want to just see to work that very.
They weren't NAMA, no. I don't know. I don't know.
No, I'm not in any way being evasive, but I can't say where they are. Okay, because obviously we're working through the commercials, but we got to actually have a look at how that arrangement would work. I see an opportunity. Actually, NAMA, by the way, do have a role, and I'm not talking about these specific ones, but in general terms, like I've looked at where NAMA, one of their objectives is to return the highest, return to the taxpayer. But on the other side, NAMA do have the social good piece. So there are some developments we're working on to deliver social and affordable and state-owned properties on land that NAMA is related in. But on these ones to talk about, I'm working through the financial models as to how that would work. I got cabinet approval just about 3 weeks ago on this specific thing. And the good thing about them is these are sites with planning permissions and could lead to, a significant stepping up further of affordable and social homes, right? So this year we're targeting about 4,100 affordable, about 9,000 new builds social. and then through other deliveries. That's a big amount, and 4,100 affordable from nothing basically last year and from nothing in the last 15 years is a big deal. I've also changed other things you mentioned. Look, co-living I got rid of.
Yeah.
I got rid of the, which I didn't like, that SHD, the straight to on board Planola planning. I said in my position.
Let's not go down on board.
We won't, trust me. But that's gone. So I want planning back at local authorities.
Yeah.
So I suppose in a positive sense, Kieran, this one, and I know what the reality is, but if you look at this year, right, in the last 12 months, we've the highest home completion since 2008, the highest home commencement since 2008, highest planning permissions. And it's tough still out there. I said 16,000 first-time buyers getting back in. So the momentum's there. It is not perfect. And a lot of people are not feeling it yet, but they will. And we've got to, the difference with this housing plan, and people throw their eyes up, there is another government with a housing plan. This is backed with finance. It has the capital, and it's actually happening now. And it is gaining momentum there. But I'll always look for opportunities where we can deliver more. So that's in the sense of what you've just mentioned there. If there are opportunities present itself and I can get approval to do it, I'll do it, because we need to be building at least 33,000 homes a year.
And I guess we need to treat it like we did with the COVID thing. Like, it has to be an emergency, and these, like, we need to act on it. And I say we as a nation. I've two more, because I know we haven't got much time, so I want to just go through. So we've spoken about the homeless figures, we've spoken about renters and build to rent. And just I put a funny tweet up a while. I don't know if you saw it. Just
I didn't.
About your tweet from 2019 about calling to restrict the tax incentives for institutional investors. He said 1/3 of homes are being snapped up by cuckoo funds, and the state is restricting the market for first-time buyers. It's even worse now. But and I put a funny tweet up because someone should do something about that. But it's
I am. I'm glad you raised it. Well, I've mentioned some stuff that I said in opposition I've done in government, and here's another thing that we've done, because you're right. Like, I don't want, look, we need investment in the right places, okay? And some will say we don't want them at all. I don't agree with that, okay? We need about 12 billion euro a year to deliver the housing that we need, and we're putting in about 4.5 billion. And there will always be private investment in any normal estate. People get finance and they go do their thing.
Yeah. What
I did in particular, and if we look at Maynooth, if you remember the situation in Maynooth, in relation to that proposed sale, which by the way never happened, and they all
that's
individual. So let's remember that too, okay? But I did act on it in relation to changing the planning guidelines. That happened in May 2021. There were two things that were done there, and this relates to new properties. I couldn't do it retrospectively, unfortunately. I can't. Was actually to bring in a condition on planning for homes that they be for single purchasers only. That's never been done in Irish law before. And actually, in advance of this, of us doing this, I was just checking on the most recent figures we had on that. And we had over 16,000 homes now granted permission with that condition in it, which means that they can't be bulk bought, whether you pay the 10% stamp or not.
But what about apartments though?
Yeah, well, what we looked at, and I discussed this with finance as well, just on the homes, I think that's houses and duplexes. Okay, so they're in that. The other thing is, people will see in our cities at the moment, particularly in our cities, is there's no apartments being built. The only ones being built are
for rent.
Are for rent. Okay, but we still need rental properties though. So I think we've got to be careful not to cut off our nose to spite our face. Now and I don't keep talking about schemes, but we do have an activation scheme called Crecona Cities, which is going to help to bridge the viability gap for home purchasers in apartments in our cities, because I want to see that. But no one can argue with me, unfortunately, or they can argue with me, of course they can, but I just mean that we need, rental properties too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's why effectively the measures that I've taken have actually in the owner-occupier guarantee, which is there for local authorities too. So we're saying that the homes and duplexes we've managed to protect for new builds right back to May 2021. And then the additional surcharge, the additional levy that Pascal brought through of 10% on purchases. Now, I'm aware of the case just down the road for me in Swords, and I read about in Castleview. I know the estate well. That estate's been there for quite a number of years, and my understanding is, like, I don't want investors in the home market, okay? and that's not really where they should be. But what I'm saying to you is, like, that was a commercial sale, but from what I understand, between
I've
one and
no idea what happened
look,
with that one. I don't think anyone
and
can explain
I
it.
can't get my head around it, to be
No.
honest, because
Yeah.
it doesn't make any financial sense. So
No.
I haven't been able to get under the bonnet completely on it. But what I am saying to people, the people who are following you, is that we've leveled the pitch there for home buyers. Okay, we've got to be, and that's been done, and that the figures are borne out there, and we've protected those homes. Secondly, then I've got rid of the build to rent piece, because that was an issue as well,
Yeah.
where there were whole apartment blocks being built, as you said, as units, right, just for rental. And then, and I said I didn't like, so that stopped. Okay, whatever's coming through the process is the process, but that's ended now.
Okay.
But we've got to crack the nut about how we can build apartments that people can buy at an affordable price.
I know, and that's the question, isn't it?
It is, and we're going to be able to do some through Housing for All. I mentioned the activation fund and then the viability fund. So we do have quite a significant amount of expressions of interest in there to partner with the state to deliver apartments in our cities that are affordable, because I want people living in our cities.
Yeah. Speak on that. I'm going to cut off you because I've only got three. I know I've only got you for 3 more minutes. So on that, you want people living in the cities, and where we've bought, we're in the middle of the city centre. And as a teacher, what I'm seeing is those people who, I don't like being called the squeezed middle or whatever, but that's what people seem to label us as. But people like me, let's say they're single. So let's say how can a single person who works in the city, say they're earning 40 grand. 40 grand's a lot of money, let's say they're doing that. How can they live on their own? You can't let's say a newly qualified teacher on, say you're coming out with 2,300 a month net after all the other bits that come out. 30% of that would be €700. They can't find anywhere to live for €700 a month. And then what I'm seeing in schools is we're relying on students to plug the gap whenever there's so many schools that can't fill permanent positions. Like in the past, a permanent position in teaching is like win the lotto. Now it's like we can't even fill them because they're all gone. They're all leaving. They're gone over to the Middle East.
Well, and I've been in the Middle East myself, and I met a lot of our teachers over there. A lot of teachers go over there for a couple of years, and
So what can single people do? Like what can we do?
What I'm saying to you is this. Okay, firstly, in relation to the job market, thankfully, and the economy is going well. We've nearly 2.6 million people working, and that just doesn't happen. That's due to everyone's hard work. In relation to single people, the first home scheme will work very well for them. Okay, because that'll help to bridge the gap too. Okay, so that's the equity scheme that I've discussed earlier. Our affordable schemes through local authorities, which are now happening, because we're looking at selling homes from about 160,000 and up between 160.
But if they're earning too much to qualify for the social side of it, and then let's say they can't find anywhere to buy because they're competing against investors. So is there an argument? Is there a way that we can get investors, whether it's institutional or whatever, that they can't buy owner? All existing stock has to be sold to owner occupiers. I don't know if legally that's possible.
Well, that's going to be I've done it for new stock, and I've explained that. So that is done, right? For single people, it's always been tougher to get a mortgage of the mortgage level you want, because there's only one salary. Okay, so that's why first home helps. Okay, and it helps in a big way, because it'll give you an extra 30% in equity. So you get your help to buy, which I know you've been critical of, and I respect that, right? So you're a single earner. If you're on 40 grand, you get your 3.5 times salary. You can get up to 30,000 in your help to buy, and you can get a third on top of that through equity, which isn't a loan. That gives you a lot more options, okay? And it does give a lot more options. But fundamentally, and housing stock is going up this year, we need more supply. And it's not just all supplies by target, but we do, because and the right type of properties in the right areas. And when I look into next year, and Ukraine and inflation aside,
unfortunately, we ran out of time there just as Darragh was about to tell all single people how they're going to be able to afford to buy a home. But anyway, it was a really good chat with Darragh. As I said in the podcast, I'm very appreciative of him for being so generous with his time for me. He has always been very generous with his time for me, and he absolutely doesn't need to be. I'm just some fella off the internet that's always giving out. But I guess my goal with this podcast was to try and, get across the message, being critical of government policy And I think you can be critical of government policy without being obnoxious or rude or not understanding. Like, I totally get how tough a job it is for him at the moment as the Minister for Housing. I think it's a job that probably no one else would want. I certainly would not want to be doing it. I think it's fairly thankless at times. And my own personal opinion is that he's taken over from Owen Murphy, who I think was a disastrous Minister for Housing with the policies he has brought in. And Darragh has had to spend the last couple of years trying to undo those policies. But it has been 2 years and things have gotten worse. So I think it's important that I flag that with him, and I think he gets it. I've always found Darragh to be really sound to me, to be honest. And my personal opinion is, and as I said, I have no allegiances to any political party, but I feel like Fianna Fáil being in power with Fine Gael, I think they have fairly different objectives and fairly different ideas on policy. And I do feel like maybe Fianna Fáil could be a little bit more progressive with their housing policies, and they may have a bit more of a better impact if Fine Gael weren't there. I know it's taken this long to get Pascal Donoghue to agree to a vacant home tax, so I think that's just the standard issue with coalitions, and when it's not one single party in charge, they have to make concessions with the beliefs or the ideologies of the other political party, and then not forgetting the Green Party also. But that's just my own personal opinion. I don't know, maybe that's wrong, maybe I have a point. That remains to be seen. My prediction will be I wouldn't be shocked if we see Fianna Fáil in with Sinn Féin after the next election. But anyway, a really interesting chat with Darragh, and just want to take this moment to say thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon, because their support makes it possible for me to keep the page going, keep Twitter going, keep the Instagram going. There is extra content over on the Patreon. They get early release to these podcasts also, as well as their own podcast, their own specific Q&As, and I've other podcasts over there with experts on all things house buying related. And also my letter that we wrote to buy our house off market is up there. That's always a popular one. But anyway, thanks to everybody for listening. I hope you all have a great week. Agus slán live.